Before we begin, drop a comment below with your country and what time it is right now where you're watching. Whether it's sunrise in Nairobi, midnight in New York, afternoon in Canada, or evening in France, I want to know. Don't just sit back. Tell me where in the world you are. Now, let's dive into the story. Saren Ave Laura felt her breath catch as Aldrich Vaylor's voice thundered through the marble hall of the Obsidian Keep. Torches threw jagged shadows across his hardened face, casting the alpha in the kind of cold fire that made everyone around him fall silent. Saren stood at the center of the room, her trembling hands resting over the curve of her stomach as the shock spread through her like winter frost. "You are a mistake," Aldrich growled, every syllable echoing through the balconies above. "A moment of weakness I should never have allowed." Gasps rippled across the crowd. Saren's cheeks burned with humiliation, so sharp it almost felt like a physical wound. She stared at Aldrich, hoping, pleading silently, that he would take it back, but his expression only hardened, the distance in his eyes colder than the mountain winds outside. The keep she once trusted now felt like a cavern built to swallow her whole. Something inside Saren folded in on itself, a quiet shattering she was certain no one else heard. The twins had been moving minutes before, fluttering softly like tiny hands pressing against her ribs. Now they were still, as though even they sensed the danger closing in. Aldrich did not stop. "Leave Moonspire Ridge before dusk. I will not claim you. I will not claim them." His words struck with the force of claws raking down her heart. Marek Thornwell, the beta, shifted uneasily beside him but didn't speak. No one dared. Saren's vision swayed as her gaze swept across the carved wolves staring down at her from stone balconies, their empty eyes mocking her hope. She had entered this place believing in possibilities, believing in him. Now she was nothing more than a public stain for him to erase. Her pulse hammered so loudly it drowned out even the murmuring wind pressing against the high windows. Shame and fear twisted together, threatening to drag Saren to her knees. She took one step backward. The scrape of her boot on stone echoed far too loudly, like the building itself recoiling from her presence. Memories she didn't want, moonlit conversations, soft promises, Aldrich's fingers brushing her cheek, washed over her and stung like salt rubbed into an open wound. She wrapped an arm around her stomach as though she could shield her children from the cruelty in the room. She refused to break in front of them. "Very well," she whispered, barely audible beneath the whispers rising behind her. But Aldrich heard. For one flickering second, something unsettled crossed his face, quick, hidden, fragile. Then it vanished beneath the armor of an alpha who allowed no weakness. Saren turned toward the towering doors, her step slow, heavy, painful. The twins fluttered faintly again, as if sensing the fear building within her. She didn't look back. She couldn't. The long hall stretched before her, dim and endless, its shadows clinging to her cloak like cold hands trying to pull her down. Behind her, the whispers rose into cruel, sharp-edged murmurs. She really thought he'd choose her? Human-born. Of course this was coming. He needs a worthy Luna. Each comment landed like a stone aimed at her spine, but she kept moving. She pressed a hand to her belly as a sudden ache twisted through her. "It's all right," she whispered breathlessly. "We're leaving." At the end of the hall, she placed both palms against the enormous doors and pushed. Cold air rushed in, filled with the smell of pine and mist and an approaching storm. She hesitated only a moment, long enough for her heart to ache for the apology Aldrich would never give, then stepped outside. The doors closed behind her with a heavy, echoing finality, like the last page of a life being shut forever. Night swallowed her as she descended the steps. Moonspire Ridge towered overhead, jagged and cruel, as though even the mountain disapproved of her. The path downward twisted into Silver's hard forest, a place no one entered after sunset without risking death, but she had no choice. Dusk was bleeding across the sky, and Aldrich's wolves obeyed every command without question. If she stayed, she and her unborn twins would be hunted. A cold wind cut through her cloak, carrying distant patrol howls that made her blood freeze. The twins kicked sharply, urgency pulsing from within. Saren pressed her hand to her stomach. "I know," she whispered. "We have to run." But as she stepped toward the forest, the hairs along her neck lifted. She wasn't alone. A figure watched her from high on the cliff, a dark silhouette, unmoving, patient, almost hungry. Saren's heart thudded painfully. She tightened her cloak, gripped her stomach, and plunged into the trees, branches clawing at her as the unseen watcher stepped closer to the cliff's edge. Saren Avelora had not always feared the night. Months before Aldrich cast her out, she had stood at the edge of Moonspire Ridge under the same swirling sky, feeling the wind tug at her hair like a playful spirit. Back then, she believed the world was finally opening for her. She had just arrived from Ashwood Valley, exhausted from running 2 jobs and caring for her sick mother, who whispered warnings on her deathbed that Saren never understood. "Trust your heart, but fear the wolves and men," Morella Avelora had said, her voice thin as fading smoke. Saren dismissed it as metaphor, until she met Aldrich Vaylor. He had appeared under the lantern lights of the old market, a presence so sharp, so impossibly magnetic, that she felt the air shift the moment he looked at her. She hadn't known he was a wolf. She hadn't known what alpha meant. She had only seen a man who watched her as though she were the first quiet thing he'd encountered in a violent world. And she had let herself believe in that illusion. Their story had begun not with romance, but with rescue. Saren had been cornered behind the market by 2 drunk travelers arguing over her tips jar, and Aldrich stepped into the alley like a storm made flesh. His eyes glowed with an amber intensity she didn't understand, and the men fled without him lifting a hand. Saren had felt both awe and unease wash through her. Aldrich didn't smile. He only studied her with an unreadable expression, like he was waiting for something. "You're trembling," he had said, voice low and strangely gentle. "I won't hurt you." She believed him, too quickly, too easily. He walked her home that night, saying little, but every word he spoke carried weight. She didn't know it then, but he could already smell her dormant wolf blood, the faint thread of lineage she never knew she carried. A lineage that made her dangerous in ways she couldn't yet imagine. Days turned into weeks, and Aldrich kept appearing, outside her workplace, near her apartment stairs, at the quiet edge of the woods where she walked to clear her mind. At first, Saren thought it was coincidence, but she felt his presence before she ever saw him. There was something haunting in the way he watched her, as though he were fighting a battle she couldn't see. When he finally kissed her, it wasn't with the gentleness of a man falling in love, but with the desperation of someone losing control. Saren didn't understand then that alphas were not supposed to choose humans. She didn't understand what it meant that his touch lingered, that his wolf stirred every time she spoke his name. What she did know was how fiercely her heart raced whenever he was near. He made her feel chosen for the first time in her life. Not pitted. Not invisible. Chosen. And she mistook that hunger in his eyes for affection rather than instinct. When Aldrich brought her to Moonspire Ridge for the first time, Saren had felt like an intruder wandering into a sacred world. Wolves watched her from balconies and torchlit stairways, their eyes sharp, evaluating, disbelieving. Marek Thornwell offered her a polite nod, but the others didn't hide their disapproval. Aldrich walked with his hand on her back, as though shielding her and claiming her at the same time. "They'll accept you," he had murmured. "In time." But as Saren looked around the high stone walls and ancient runes carved into pillars, she sensed a discord beneath the surface, like every shadow was whispering that she didn't belong. She told herself it didn't matter. After all, Aldrich had chosen her. He led her through the keep, showed her the moonlit gardens, and spoke with surprising softness about wanting a life free of political expectations. Saren believed him. She believed everything he said because she wanted so badly to be enough. The night everything changed was quiet, almost strangely peaceful. Saren had been lying beside Aldrich in his private chamber, the moonlight warming her skin as she drifted half asleep. He traced slow circles on her back, more tender than usual, as though memorized by a future he wasn't sure he was allowed to have. When she whispered that she was late, weeks late, he went still. Completely still. Saren felt him withdraw internally even before he pulled away physically. He said nothing for a long, breathless moment. Then he stood, walked to the window, and stared out at Moonspire Ridge with a tension that made her throat tighten. "A child changes everything," he finally said, voice flat. Saren reached for him, but he stepped farther away. That was the first fracture. The first warning. The first hint that love and fear could look the same inside an alpha's eyes. She didn't know then that Vespera Nightthorn had already begun poisoning the council against her. She didn't know Aldrich was being told that her bloodline made her dangerous. She only knew he had turned cold, and she prayed it was temporary. The days after Saren revealed her pregnancy became a study in slow unraveling. Aldrich Vaylor grew distant in ways that felt deliberate. Longer patrols, colder greetings, nights spent away from their shared chamber. Saren tried to convince herself it was stress, that the weight of leading Moonspire Ridge pressed harder on him than usual. But she watched him carefully, saw the way his jaw tightened whenever she entered a room, saw how his wolf surfaced in his eyes whenever someone mentioned the future. Whispers followed her, through the keep. Human blood. Unfit mother. An alpha's children deserve a Luna of power. Saren tried to block out the voices, but the walls themselves seemed eager to repeat them. Still, she clung to hope. She remembered the way Aldrich once looked at her, like she was a calm in his storm. She believed that version of him still existed. She believed love was stronger than fear. She had no idea that someone had begun weaving panic into Aldrich's mind, poisoning the fragile place where love once lived. The poison had a name. Vespera Nightthorn. A woman with eyes like polished frost and a smile that never touched them. She was a council member, a strategist, and a master at turning truths into traps. Vespera approached Aldrich under the guise of loyalty, whispering about ancient laws, forbidden bloodlines, and political dangers. "A human-born mother dilutes the royal lineage," she murmured one night in the council hall. "Your father fought wars to keep the Vaylor name strong. Will you be known as the Alpha who weakened it?" Aldrich tried to dismiss her at first. He said the children were his, that his choice was enough. But Vespera pressed deeper, weaving doubt as easily as breathing. "You don't understand the old stories," she said. "Her blood carries something hidden, something that could break this pack." He didn't know she was speaking half-truths tangled with lies. He didn't know she had everything to gain from Saren's downfall. Saren sensed danger, even if she couldn't name it. Every time she walked through the keep's corridors, she felt eyes sliding over her like icy fingers. Marek Thornwell tried to offer quiet reassurances, but even he seemed nervous, glancing over his shoulder before speaking. "Aldrich's under pressure," he said one afternoon. "The council is tense." Saren forced a smile, but inside a knot tightened. She wanted to ask what they whispered about her, but fear held her tongue. That night, she attempted to speak with Aldrich again. She found him in the moonlit courtyard, standing among the frost-coated roses. His shoulders were tense, his fists clenched. "Aldrich," she whispered, stepping closer. He turned slowly, his eyes unreadable. "Do you regret us?" she asked, voice trembling despite her attempts to hide it. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stared past her, as though he were listening to a distant voice she couldn't hear. When he finally spoke, his tone was cold enough to cut. "Everything is complicated, Saren." His distance continued to grow, but Saren grew more afraid than angry. She felt the twins inside her, their movements stronger with each passing day, and instinct screamed at her to protect them. She began keeping to herself, staying in quieter corridors, avoiding staircases where wolves liked to gather and whisper. The only place she felt safe was the garden Morella once loved. Her mother's memory felt warm there, a soft reminder of gentler days. Saren visited often, sitting on the stone bench beneath the silverleaf tree. One night, she heard the branches rustle above her, and for a moment she swore she heard her mother's voice say, "You must prepare." Chills swept through her. She pressed a hand to her belly. "For what?" she whispered. But the wind didn't answer. She didn't realize someone else stood watching her from the shadows. Jorin Blacklaw, rogue wolf, pack outcast, and a man whose loyalty shifted like the changing moon. The breaking point arrived during a council meeting Saren wasn't meant to hear. She had gone to find Aldrich, wanting to share the twins' newest movements, proof that life continued even when love faltered. But as she reached the council doors, the voices inside froze her in place. "She's a liability," Vespera said sharply. "Her bloodline is unstable. The old prophecies warn of children born of mixed lineage. They bring ruin." Another council member agreed. Moonspire Ridge cannot risk it. Saren's heart pounded wildly. Then Aldrich's voice joined the others, not raised in her defense, but softened in uncertainty. "I don't know what to believe anymore." Saren felt the world tilt, the floor slip out from beneath her. She backed away from the door before she made a sound. Tears blurred her vision as she stumbled down the corridor, clutching her stomach. For the first time, she realized the truth. Aldrich wasn't losing her. He was letting her go. Worse, he was letting fear decide her fate. Saren didn't wait for morning. The moment she heard Aldrich's uncertainty inside that council chamber, something inside her snapped with quiet, devastating clarity. Love could survive distance, fear, and even mistakes, but not abandonment. Not when the man she trusted was willing to consider her and their children a threat. She returned to their chamber on trembling legs, shutting the door softly behind her. The moonlight spilled through the windows, painting pale streaks across the floorboards, and the room felt different now, cold, hollow, stripped of every whisper of safety it once held. Saren pressed her hands to her belly as the twins shifted gently. "We're leaving," she whispered. "Before they decide we're better off gone." She gathered only what she needed: a cloak, water, a small pouch of coins, and the silver pendant her mother left her. As she clasped it around her neck, tears burned her eyes. She wished she could hate Aldrich. She wished she could forget the moments when he held her like she was the only thing keeping him sane. But love was a stubborn wound, bleeding even as she wrapped it tight. Every instinct told her she had to flee before dawn, before Aldrich's doubt hardened into something irreversible. She moved swiftly, quietly, her footsteps muffled by the woven carpets lining the chamber halls. But the keep was alive with whispers. Wolves prowled near staircases, council members lingered in tense clusters, and the air itself felt watchful. Saren kept her hood low, her cloak clutched tightly around her swelling stomach. She didn't dare take the main corridors. Instead, she slipped through back passages she'd learned by accident, narrow stone hallways that servants used and warriors ignored. As she descended the servants' stairwell, she heard footsteps above her. Heavy, purposeful. She held her breath as two guards crossed the landing. "The Alpha is restless," one muttered. "He's searching for her." The other scoffed. He should have kept her on a tighter leash. Saren's heart cracked again, a quieter break this time, one she didn't have time to mourn. When the guards moved on, she rushed down the remaining steps, her pulse pounding like frantic wings. The lower levels of the keep were colder, the air damp with the scent of stone and old earth. Saren pushed through the back door leading to the gardens, where frost shimmered across the silverleaf trees she loved. She paused, just for a heartbeat, to steady herself. Her breath misted in the air. The moon hung low, heavy and swollen, casting long shadows across the paths. "Morella," she whispered into the night, as though her mother might answer. "If you can hear me, please guide me." A sudden wind swept through the garden, rustling the leaves in a way that felt purposeful. Saren took it as a sign. She followed the narrow path toward the outer wall, where an old gate, half swallowed by vines, led toward the mountain trail. She'd never walked it alone, but she knew it was her only chance to reach Silver's hard forest before patrol wolves circled the keep. She pushed on, determined, even as pain flickered low in her abdomen like a warning. Just as Saren reached the gate, a shadow detached itself from the stone wall. She froze, fear slamming into her ribs. Jorin Blacklaw stepped into the moonlight, his dark hair wild, his eyes sharp and unreadable. He was the last wolf she wanted to encounter. His reputation was a storm of half-truths and whispered betrayals. "You shouldn't be out here," he said softly, but there was no threat in his tone. Only curiosity. Saren lifted her chin, though her legs trembled. "If you plan to stop me, I'll fight you." Jorin raised both hands in surrender. "Relax, Avelora. I'm not here to drag you back to him." His gaze drifted to her stomach, a flicker of something like understanding crossing his face. "You're running." Saren stiffened. "You don't need to tell Aldrich." Jorin let out a dry laugh. I'm the last wolf he'd listened to. He stepped aside, nodding toward the gate. "Go. Before they realize you're missing." Saren hesitated, unsure whether to trust him. But trust was a luxury she no longer had time for. She slipped past him, pushing the gate open. The mountain air hit her like ice, sharp and bracing. The trail winding down towards Silver's hard forest stretched dark and twisting beneath the faint silver glow of the moon. Saren pulled her cloak tighter and began her descent, each step a mix of fear and fierce determination. Behind her, she thought she heard voices rising from the keep, angry, urgent, searching. Panic stabbed through her. She quickened her pace, nearly stumbling as the path steepened. The twins shifted again, as though urging her onward. "We're almost safe," she murmured, though she didn't fully believe it. A distant howl echoed across the ridge, carried by the wind. A patrol wolf. Saren's breath hitched, terror flooding her veins. She couldn't be caught. Not now. Not when freedom was finally within reach. Branches snapped behind her. Footsteps followed. Someone was giving chase. Saren gathered every ounce of strength she had left and ran, her cloak billowing behind her as she plunged toward the waiting darkness of Silver's hard forest. Silver's hard forest swallowed Saren whole the moment she crossed its threshold. The trees rose like ancient guardians, their branches twisted into claw-like shapes that scraped the sky. Fog drifted low across the ground, glowing faintly under the moonlight, and every sound felt magnified. The crunch of her boots, the rhythmic thrum of her heartbeat, the faint rustle of unseen creatures. She kept one hand over her stomach, whispering steady breaths to calm the twins as they shifted inside her. Behind her, the hurried footsteps grew louder, more frantic. Someone was close. Too close. Saren pushed herself harder, ignoring the burning in her legs. She ducked beneath low branches and scrambled over fallen logs, every instinct screaming at her to move faster. A howl pierced the night, sharper than before, echoing through the forest with deadly intent. Aldrich's wolves were searching. Saren's chest tightened painfully. She couldn't let them reach her. She couldn't let her children be taken. She stumbled against a tree, gasping, then forced herself onward, deeper into the forest where the shadows thickened and even moonlight hesitated to follow. The chase behind her grew more chaotic. She heard snarls, snapping branches, and at least one voice shouting her name, angry, desperate. She didn't dare look back. Instead, she took the narrowest paths, weaving between jagged rocks that jutted from the earth like broken teeth. Her cloak snagged on a thorn vine, ripping at the hem, but she kept running. Pain flared low in her belly, a sharp pull that made her stumble. "Not now," she whispered, bracing herself against a tree as the pain faded into a dull ache. The twins responded with a shaky flutter. Another howl rose, closer this time, carrying a command she recognized even without words. Aldrich was searching for her himself. Saren's breath caught. She had imagined his anger, his coldness, but not this frantic pursuit. The forest trembled with the weight of predators moving through it. She forced herself back into motion, wiping tears she didn't remember crying. The fog thickened as she pushed deeper, the world narrowing to the sound of her own breathing and the frantic beat of escape. A sudden movement to her left made her freeze. A figure stepped from the shadows, a shape too tall to be a wolf, too silent to be human. Saren's heart nearly stopped until the figure lifted their hands slowly. Jorin Blackclaw emerged into the moonlight, his expression strained. "You're hurt," he said, voice low. Saren shook her head, though she could barely stand. I'm fine. Jorin scanned the forest behind her, jaw tight. No, you're not. And they're closing in. Saren stepped back cautiously, not trusting the flicker of concern in his eyes. Why are you here? She asked, her voice shaking. Jorin hesitated, then said, Because I know what they'll do if they catch you. The weight of his words sank into her bones. He gestured toward a narrow ravine ahead, half hidden by moss-covered stones. There's a den down there, old, abandoned. You'll be invisible to anyone tracking scent. Saren hesitated only a moment. The forest thundered with approaching wolves. She had no choice. She nodded, and Jorin guided her toward the ravine, staying close but not touching her, as though aware she might bolt at the slightest wrong move. They reached the edge of the ravine, where roots twisted down the steep slope like gnarled ropes. Saren felt another spike of pain, deeper and sharper this time, stealing the breath from her lungs. She clutched her belly, panic rising. Saren. Jorin stepped forward as she wavered. She forced her voice steady. Help me down. He climbed first, moving with the fluid ease of someone who knew the land well, then reached up to guide her. Saren followed carefully, gripping the roots as she lowered herself. Halfway down, her foot slipped on damp moss. She cried out, but Jorin caught her wrist before she could fall. Easy, he murmured, anchoring her. Once she reached the bottom, the ground was cool and soft beneath her boots. A shallow cave opened ahead, hidden by tangled roots. Saren slipped inside, her breath ragged. The air felt thick and ancient, carrying the scent of old earth and forgotten seasons. Jorin crouched at the entrance, scanning the forest above. They're close, he whispered. Saren pressed her back to the cool stone and closed her eyes. The twins shifted restlessly. She whispered a shaky promise. I'll keep you safe. The forest erupted with sound, snarls, pounding footsteps, the unmistakable command in Aldrich's voice. Saren's blood turned to ice. She shrank deeper into the shadows as Jorin leaned forward, tension coiling through him. Wolves darted past the ravine above, their eyes glowing like hunted fire. One paused, sniffing the air, and Saren held her breath until her lungs screamed. After several heartbeats, the wolf turned and raced after the others. Silence settled slowly, thick and suffocating. Jorin exhaled. They didn't catch the trail, he said. For now. Saren nodded, her body trembling from exhaustion, fear, and the growing ache in her abdomen. She looked up at him. Why help me? Jorin's expression softened, only slightly. Because sometimes the wrong people become hunted. And because your children didn't choose any of this. Saren's eyes stung. Outside, distant howls drifted through the trees, wolves regrouping, searching again. She tightened her grip on her cloak. She wasn't safe yet, but she had survived the first night, and she would survive every night that followed if it meant saving her twins. Dawn crept slowly across Silver's hard forest, painting faint streaks of pale gold through the tangled canopy. Saren had barely slept. Every shift of the earth, every distant rustle of leaves, made her jolt awake in terror. Jorin Blacklaw remained near the entrance of the den, alert and silent, his presence both unsettling and strangely reassuring. When the light strengthened enough for the forest to settle, he turned toward her. You can't stay here, he murmured. Patrols will sweep through again by noon. Saren nodded, though her limbs felt heavy, her stomach tight with an ache that frightened her. The twins had been restless all night, their movements sharp and uneven. I need to reach Ashwood Valley, she said, her voice raw. Jorin studied her for a moment. Then you'll need a healer. A real one. He hesitated before adding. There's someone near Ashwood. A man named Eldrick Vane. The name stirred something faint in Saren's memory, an old rumor whispered among travelers. She met Jorin's eyes. Take me to him. For the first time, he looked uncertain. It's a long journey in your condition. Saren pressed a hand to her belly. We don't have a choice. They emerged from the den cautiously, the morning air sharp and cool as it brushed against Saren's skin. The forest felt different in daylight, still vast, still dangerous, but less suffocating than the night before. Even so, every few steps, Saren looked over her shoulder, expecting wolves to burst from the undergrowth. Jorin kept a steady pace beside her, navigating narrow trails carved by animals rather than people. He moved with the precision of someone who knew how predators thought, which paths they favored, which shadowed hollows would swallow sound. Saren's breaths came shallow, her exhaustion heavy. After an hour of walking, a sudden cramp seized her abdomen, sharp enough to make her stumble. Jorin caught her arm instantly. "You should rest." Saren shook her head, teeth clenched. If Aldrich's searching, resting is suicide. But the pain surged again, forcing her to bend forward. One hand braced against a tree. Fear twisted through her. Something's wrong. Jorin's expression shifted, concern flickering behind his guarded exterior. "Then we go faster," he said, his voice gentler than she'd expected. "Lean on me." With Jorin's support, Saren pushed onward. The forest thinned gradually, the trees spreading farther apart until sunlight broke through more freely. In the distance, rolling hills stretched toward Ashwood Valley, their soft slopes a painful contrast to the jagged cliffs of Moonspire Ridge. Saren's chest tightened at the sight, not from exertion, but from memories. Ashwood was where her mother had raised her, where Morella had whispered stories of old magic and warned her never to wander too close to wolflands. Saren swallowed hard, guilt tugging at her. She had ignored Morella's fears, believing the world was kinder than the warnings implied. The twins kicked again, one sharp and urgent. Jorin glanced at her, brow furrowed. Vane's cabin isn't far now. As they descended the last slope, a thin trail of smoke curled from a chimney tucked at the forest's edge. The structure was small, weathered, half hidden beneath a massive oak. Saren felt a faint ripple of hope. "That's him." Jorin nodded. "Let's pray he's willing to help." The cabin door opened before they even reached it. Aldrich Vane stepped out, leaning heavily on a gnarled staff, his long gray hair tied loosely behind him. His eyes, sharp, pale, unsettlingly observant, moved from Jorin to Saren, then dropped to her swollen stomach. His expression tightened. "You've brought me trouble, Blacklaw." Jorin shrugged. "Trouble needs healing." Aldrich huffed, his stare returning to Saren. "Come inside before you collapse." The interior smelled of herbs, crushed leaves, and something bitter simmering over a small fire. Saren sank onto the nearest wooden stool, her body trembling with exhaustion. Aldrich placed 2 fingers against her wrist, feeling her pulse, then pressed lightly along her abdomen. Saren flinched at the tenderness. "The twins are strong," Aldrich murmured, "but you're running on fear alone." He glanced at Jorin. "Aldrich will tear down half the valley searching for her." Saren's breath hitched, panic spiking. Aldrich met her gaze. "You're safe for now. But if you want those children to live, we don't have much time." Saren swallowed hard as Aldrich mixed a concoction of herbs with practiced speed. Each movement was deliberate, revealing decades of knowledge hidden behind his sharp exterior. He handed her a steaming cup. "Drink. It'll calm the strain on your body." Saren hesitated. "How do I know I can trust you?" Aldrich gave a thin, humorless smile. "You don't. But your children need this." She drank. Warmth spread through her limbs, easing the cramps and softening her trembling breath. For the first time since fleeing the keep, she felt her body relax. Jorin paced near the doorway, alert and restless. "We need a plan," he said. Aldrich nodded. "Aldrich won't risk war by storming Ashwood, but he will send hunters. And if Vespera is stirring the council, they'll want the children for their own purposes." Saren's heart pounded. "What purposes?" Aldrich's expression darkened. "There are old prophecies about mixed-blood alpha heirs. Dangerous ones." He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a grave whisper. "And if they're true, your twins may be the most powerful wolves born in a century." Saren froze. The room felt suddenly too small, too hot, too fragile to hold the weight of the truth settling over her. Moonspire Ridge shook with fury the moment Aldrich Vaylor learned Saren had vanished. The council chamber erupted into chaos, wolves shouting over one another, warriors running in and out with frantic reports, Vespera Nightthorn standing back with eyes sharpened like frost-tipped blades. Aldrich stood at the center of it all, breathing hard, shoulders tense, his amber eyes glowing bright with a rage none of them had seen before. "How did she slip past patrols?" he snarled. No one answered. Marek Thornwell, caught between loyalty and truth, finally stepped forward. "She left before dawn. Tracks lead into Silver's hard forest." Aldrich's jaw locked, and a dangerous growl rumbled from deep in his chest. He didn't understand why the fury inside him felt tangled with something far more raw: fear. He had expected her to cry, to plead, to argue. He had believed she would stay even when he pushed her away. The realization that he had driven her into danger hit him with brutal force. Vespera approached quietly. "This is why she had to go," she murmured. "She weakens you." Aldrich turned on her, eyes blazing. "She is carrying my children." The words came out like a confession he despised himself for feeling. But Vespera only smiled faintly, tilting her head like a serpent amused by a struggling prey. "Children who might destroy everything your father built. You heard the prophecies." Aldrich shook his head sharply. He didn't want to hear them again. He didn't want to think of the ancient warnings carved into Moonstone, the ones whispering of mixed-blood heirs with power strong enough to fracture an alpha's mind. But the seeds of fear Vespera planted days ago had taken root. Now they twisted in him like poisonous vines. "The council expects an answer," she continued. "Do you choose your pack or your mistake?" Aldrich's chest tightened painfully. Mistake. He had said that word himself, thrown it at Saren like a blade. The memory slashed through him now, the look on her face, the trembling in her hands. Regret rose like bile, swallowing the satisfaction Vespera had once coaxed from him. He turned away abruptly. "Ready a new search party," he ordered. His voice cracked, barely audible. "I will find her alive." The search tore through Silver's hard forest with ruthless precision. Wolves fanned out into shifting lines, tracking every broken branch, every faint trace of Saren's scent that drifted between the trees. Aldrich led them with a desperation he tried to hide, shifting into wolf form, his massive black coat bristling with fury. He ran faster than his warriors, tearing through the underbrush as though the forest itself hindered him. Saren's scent was faint, too faint, but it threaded through the damp earth and clung to the bark of trees like a fading plea. Every time he lost it, he snarled savagely, clawing at the ground, refusing to accept the possibility she had crossed into human territory where pack law bound his hands. The twins' scent lingered with hers, tiny, delicate, unmistakably his. The weight of that knowledge pressed into him with every breath. He remembered the moment he first realized she carried his heirs. He remembered the panic, the doubt, the way Vespera whispered fear until he could no longer find his own voice beneath it. Now he wondered if he had let someone else choose his fate for him, and whether Saren had seen the truth long before he did. The trail led deeper into the forest, toward the ravine where roots tangled down the slope. Aldrich reached the edge, hackles raised. Jorin Blackclaw's scent was there, fresh, bold, insolent. Rage flared so violently, it blurred his vision. Jorin, of all wolves. If he had touched Saren, if he had helped her, the thought clawed through Aldrich's chest. He howled, a sound that shook leaves from branches and sent smaller creatures fleeing in terror. Marek arrived moments later, shifting back into human form. "Aldrich," he said carefully. "Jorin may have saved her. The scent suggests she was distressed." Aldrich bared his teeth, torn between relief and fury. Jorin was unpredictable. A rogue. A wolf who owed loyalty to no one. Yet he had kept Saren hidden long enough for her trail to vanish again. Aldrich shifted back, breath ragged. "He's taken her to someone," he murmured. "Someone who knows how to hide scent." Marek swallowed. Aldrich vain. Aldrich didn't waste time answering. He already knew. The old healer lived near Ashwood Valley, and Ashwood was the one place Aldrich's wolves avoided, out of respect and out of fear. Night approached by the time Aldrich reached the forest's edge, where distant hills rolled toward Ashwood Valley. The wind carried Saren's scent, soft, faint, but alive. For a moment, Aldrich closed his eyes, his heartbeat thunderous. He had driven her into this. He had let fear shape his words, allowed Vespera to twist prophecy into chains around his throat. But the truth struck him now with brutal clarity. He did not want a future without Saren, without the children he had once feared. He wanted them safe.
His.
And now they were slipping beyond his reach. Marek stopped behind him. Alpha, he said quietly, you can't cross into Ashwood without risking conflict. Aldrich's hands curled into fists. She is carrying my children, he repeated, the words breaking from him like a vow. His voice dropped into something darker, sharper, unyielding. War or not, I will bring them home. And for the first time since Saren fled, Aldrich knew exactly what he was willing to risk. Everything. Saren woke to the smell of unfamiliar herbs and the low crackle of fire. For a moment, she didn't know where she was. The world felt blurry, like she'd surfaced from too many nightmares layered atop one another. Then her eyes adjusted to Eldrick Fane's dimly lit cabin. Jorin was gone. The healer sat near the fire, grinding leaves with steady, practiced movements. Good, he murmured when her eyes met his. You're awake. The children held steady through the night. Relief washed over her so fast it left her trembling. She tried to sit up, but Eldrick raised a hand.
Slowly.
You pushed your body too far. Wolves can run themselves into the ground. Weaker blood cannot. Saren bristled at the implication. I'm not weak. Eldrick snorted. You're human-born. That is not weakness. That is limitation. He moved closer, eyes narrowing as he studied her stomach. These twins are growing faster than normal. They are already responding to stress. Saren swallowed hard. Aldrich's coming, isn't he? Eldrick's expression didn't change, but the pause was enough. The whole ridge will be. And not all of them will come to reclaim you gently. The day stretched on with tension coiled tightly around every second. Eldrick rarely stopped moving, checking herbs, reinforcing protective runes carved into the walls, stepping outside to watch the tree line with unsettling stillness. His urgency terrified Saren more than any direct warning could have. When Jorin finally returned at midday, his clothing was torn, and dried blood stained his sleeve. Saren surged upright in alarm. What happened? Jorin shook his head. Scouts from the ridge. They're getting too close. Eldrick didn't look surprised. Aldrich is no fool. He'll sense the valley soon. Saren's heart twisted painfully. She imagined Aldrich barreling through the forest, fury and guilt crashing inside him like twin storms. Part of her wanted him to stop searching. She feared what he might do when he found her. Another part, a quieter part, remembered the man who once held her beneath moonlit gardens. If he finds me, she whispered, he'll take the twins. Jorin moved closer, lowering his voice. Not if we move first. Eldrick shot him a sharp glare. You intend to run again? In her condition? Jorin crossed his arms. It's better than waiting here like prey. The conversation grew heated. Eldrick argued for strategy, for protection, for holding ground. Jorin insisted that staying in one place was suicide. Saren listened, her thoughts spiraling. Every instinct inside her pulsed with warning. Her body wasn't ready for another long journey, but staying meant giving Aldrich the advantage. His wolves outnumbered them, and his power dwarfed any protective spell Eldrick could conjure. She felt trapped, the cabin shrinking around her like a tightening cage. Stop, she finally said, her voice stronger than she felt. Both men fell silent. Saren pressed a hand to her stomach and met their eyes. I decide how we move.
Not you.
Eldrick lifted a brow, but didn't argue. Jorin inclined his head in respect. Saren forced herself to breathe. We need somewhere Aldrick won't think to look. Somewhere he can't follow, without risking war. Eldrick stroked his beard thoughtfully. There is one place, he murmured. Dangerous.
Old.
But hidden from wolves. He hesitated. The Crystal Hollow. Saren didn't know the name, but the dread that flickered in both men's faces told her everything. Is it safe? Eldrick answered honestly.
No.
But it's safer than Aldrich. As the sun sank, painting the sky in streaks of crimson and gold, the forest outside grew restless. Leaves rustled without wind. Birds took silent flight. Even the air felt heavier, charged with the tension of predators drawing near. Eldrick extinguished every lamp except one. Jorin checked the windows, hand resting on the dagger at his hip. Saren paced slowly, one hand supporting her belly. The twins moved repeatedly, agitated, unsettled, as if sensing the storm pressing in from the trees. Then, snap. A branch cracked outside. Close. Too close. Saren froze. Eldrick's eyes flicked toward the door. Jorin bared his teeth in a silent snarl. Another sound followed, soft, calculated footsteps approaching the cabin with predatory care. Saren's breath hitched. She knew that rhythm, knew that presence. Eldrick. Her knees weakened, her pulse racing so violently she felt dizzy. Jorin positioned himself between Saren and the door. Eldrick's hand hovered over a carved rune on the table. Silence held the room in a suffocating grip. Then a deep voice, low, controlled, trembling with fury, broke through the cabin walls like thunder.
Saren.
Open the door. Saren felt everything in her collapse and ignite all at once. Fear, longing, anger, heartbreak, they tore through her like a wildfire. Eldrick's voice was colder than the northern winds, yet cracked with something raw beneath. Saren. Another step. I know you're in there. She took a stumbling step backward as the twins kicked violently. Jorin whispered, Don't move. Eldrick's fingers tightened around a staff. Outside, something enormous brushed against the cabin wall, the unmistakable weight of a wolf in full shift. Eldrick's growl vibrated through the floorboards, sending shivers up Saren's spine. You run from me, he rumbled, and you think I'll simply let you go? His voice dropped to a trembling whisper. You and my children? Tears blurred Saren's vision. Eldrick didn't know it, but his words shattered the fragile strength holding her upright. The doorknob turned slowly, metal groaning under his grip. Eldrick hissed, He's shifting back. He means to force his way in. Saren pressed her hand to her belly, her entire body trembling. The door shook under a heavy blow. Eldrick's voice roared through the cabin. Saren, open this door.
Now.
And as the wood splintered, Saren realized one truth with chilling clarity. Eldrick had not come to reason. He had come to claim. The moment the door splintered inward, Saren felt the world shrink into a single, terrifying heartbeat. Eldrick stood framed in the jagged doorway, breath ragged, clothes torn from shifting, eyes burning with a wild mix of fury and something far more dangerous, desperation. His chest rose and fell sharply as he scanned the room, locking instantly onto her. Saren stumbled back, as though struck. Eldrick took a single step inside, and the air shifted, heavy with power. Jorin moved in front of her, blade drawn. Don't, he warned. Eldrick's gaze snapped toward him, a guttural growl vibrating through the cabin. Move, Blacklaw. Jorin didn't budge. She doesn't want to go with you. Eldrick's voice dropped into a lethal whisper. She is carrying my blood. Saren's throat tightened. His words were a claim, not a plea. Eldrick slammed his staff against the floor, runes flaring faintly across the walls. You cross this boundary with violence, Alpha, and you risk more than claim. But Eldrick didn't look at Eldrick. He barely even looked at Jorin. His gaze, haunted, furious, desperate, never left Saren. Saren felt the twins twist sharply inside her, reacting to the thick power pulsing through the room. She pressed a hand to her stomach, struggling to breathe through the pressure crushing her lungs. Eldrick, she whispered, voice trembling. Stop. For a split second he did. His shoulders tightened, his breath hitched, and his expression flickered with something almost human. Fear, regret, a silent plea he didn't know how to voice. But then his gaze swept over the overturned herbs, the protective runes carved into the walls, Jorin's stance before her. His face hardened all over again. You ran from me, he said, voice low and shaking. You took my children and vanished into a forest full of things that would kill you. Saren's heart twisted painfully at the crack in his voice. You told me I was a mistake, she whispered. Aldrich froze. Color drained from his face. For the first time since she'd met him, he looked truly unprepared, struck by his own cruelty. Saren, he murmured, a broken sound. But before he could finish, Jorin stepped forward, blade lifting again. She owes you nothing. Aldrich's rage snapped like lightning. He lunged, shifting mid-stride, body stretching, bones cracking, black fur bristling as his wolf form burst through. Jorin dodged, but Aldrich slammed him into the wall with a force that rattled the entire cabin. Saren screamed, rushing forward instinctively before Aldrich grabbed her wrist. Stay back, he barked. Aldrich's massive wolf snarled, jaws snapping inches from Jorin's throat. But Jorin wasn't unskilled. He slashed across Aldrich's shoulder, drawing blood. The alpha roared, the sound shaking dust from the rafters. Saren's vision blurred with terror. Aldrich, stop, she cried, voice cracking. The wolf's ears twitched at her voice, but his fury didn't break. Aldrich slammed his staff down again, runes blazing to life. A shockwave burst through the room, separating the wolves and forcing Aldrich backward with a snarl. The alpha staggered, shifting partially back, breath ragged, eyes glowing with primal conflict. Aldrich stepped in front of Saren, voice commanding. If you harm her or those children, prophecy or no prophecy, I will end you. Aldrich's jaw clenched, but his gaze darted towards Saren's trembling form, and everything in him buckled. Saren clutched her stomach as another sharp pain tore through her, worse than before, deeper, blinding. She gasped, collapsing to her knees as the twins kicked violently. Saren. Aldrich stumbled toward her, instincts overpowering pride, power, everything else. Jorin grabbed his arm, but Aldrich didn't fight. He dropped to his knees beside her as though ripped there by force. What's wrong? He demanded, voice shaking. Aldrich knelt on her other side, eyes sharp. The stress is forcing early shifts. Their power is waking too soon. Saren cried out, the pain splintering through her like fire. Aldrich's hands hovered, terrified to touch her. What do I do? He asked Aldrich, voice cracking open like a raw wound. Aldrich's words were grim. She needs calm, safety, and your wolf is flooding the air with fear. Aldrich's breath broke. He looked at Saren with a kind of desperation she had never imagined he possessed. Saren, I'm sorry. His voice trembled like a fractured vow. I never should have said those words. I never should have pushed you away. Tears filled his eyes, real, unhidden. Please, please don't take them from me. But the apology came too late. Another wave hit Saren, doubling her over. The air in the cabin vibrated with a sudden, wild pulse, an energy so intense the walls themselves seemed to shudder. Aldrich's eyes widened. The twins, he breathed. They're responding to both of your wolves. A crack split the wooden floorboards beneath Saren's hands. Light, bright silver light, flared around her stomach as the twins' energy surged outward. Aldrich recoiled in shock. Jorin staggered back. Aldrich whispered a curse older than the mountains. The prophecy. Saren could barely hear him through the roaring pain. She looked up at Aldrich, tears streaming down her cheeks. You can't control this, she whispered. You never could. He reached for her, voice breaking completely. I don't want control. I want you safe. But the cabin shook again, light bursting brighter with every heartbeat. Aldrich shouted, Get her out now. Aldrich scooped Saren into his arms, the twins' power crackling against his skin. The moment he crossed the threshold, the forest exploded with silver light, and the world went silent. When the silver blast finally faded, Aldrich staggered to his knees, Saren still held in his arms. The forest around them was transformed, trees bowed outward in a perfect circle, as if bending to the power that had erupted from Saren's womb. The night air throbbed with an ethereal glow, shimmering like dust caught in moonlight. Saren gasped weakly, her fingers clutching at Aldrich's shirt as pain rippled through her again, but softer this time, rhythmic and urgent. Aldrich, it's happening, she whispered. His blood ran cold. "Not here," he murmured, scanning the trembling forest. But the twins refused to wait for safety. Aldrich limped out of the shattered cabin, eyes wide with awe and fear. "The hollow won't hold them," he warned. "Their birth will mark them. It must happen where the earth is strong." He pointed toward an ancient arch of stone deeper in the forest, glowing faintly with old runes. Aldrich didn't hesitate. He gathered Saren closer, breath shaking as he carried her toward the sacred place, every step echoing a vow he had once broken, and now would give everything to repair. They reached the stone arch as another contraction tore through Saren, forcing her to her knees. Aldrich held her steady, panic clawing at him as the ground beneath the arch pulsed with silver-gold light. Aldrich knelt across from them, placing his palms against the soil. "This place is older than your pack," he said. "Older than the prophecies. It will protect them." Saren cried out again, head bowing as sweat ran down her temples. Aldrich cupped her face gently. "I'm here. I'm not leaving again." She met his gaze through tears, searching for the truth in him, and she found it. The fear that once shaped him was gone, replaced with something fierce, unguarded, human. "I loved you," she whispered, voice breaking. "Even when you hurt me." Aldrich swallowed hard, forehead touching hers. "And I failed you. But give me one more chance, Saren. Let me earn our children. Let me earn you." Before she could answer, another pulse of energy burst outward from her belly, shaking the arch above them. The twins were coming. Minutes stretched into eternity as the forest held its breath. Aldrich guided Saren through every contraction, his voice steady even as light crackled through the air. Aldrich stayed behind her, arms around her shoulders, anchoring her, murmuring apologies she had once begged for but never expected to hear. Finally, with one final cry, the air shattered with a burst of silver radiance. Aldrich reached down and lifted two small, glowing bundles from the earth. The twins' cries echoed like soft thunder. A girl and a boy. Lyra and Rowan. Saren sobbed, overwhelmed, reaching for them. Aldrich trembled so violently he could barely breathe. When Aldrich placed the twins into their parents' arms, the glow faded, revealing two tiny faces, eyes not yet open, but flickering faintly with the silver of an ancient power. Aldrich stared down at them, tears falling freely. "They're beautiful," Saren whispered. Aldrich nodded, voice broken. "They're perfect." And this time, he didn't say it with fear. He said it with awe. But peace did not last long. Leaves rustled behind them as Jorin emerged, breathless. "Aldrich," he warned. "You need to make a choice right now." Aldrich turned, shielding Saren and the twins instinctively. Moonspire wolves stood at the edge of the clearing, Vespera at their front, her eyes cold and calculating. "Alpha," she called, her voice sharp as steel. "The council demands the heirs. Mixed blood cannot rule." Saren tightened her hold on her children, terror twisting her gut. Aldrich rose slowly, power coiling around him in a way Saren had never seen before. For the first time, no shadow of doubt haunted his features. He stood between his family and the wolves. "These children," he said, voice carrying through the entire forest, "are mine. And anyone who threatens them will answer to me." Vespera stepped forward. "You would risk the pack? The throne?" Aldrich's eyes darkened to molten amber. "For them? For her? Yes." A wind surged through the clearing, as if the forest itself acknowledged his vow. Vespera hesitated, and for the first time, she stepped back. The confrontation broke. The wolves withdrew, some reluctantly, others reverently, as though witnessing the rise of something far older than their laws. Aldrich knelt beside Saren again, his voice soft. "Come home with me." Saren looked at him, exhausted, still trembling, still unsure. "Aldrich, everything broke." He shook his head, taking her hand gently. "Then let me fix it. Not because of prophecy. Not because of power. Because I choose you. I choose our children." Saren searched his eyes, and this time, she saw no lies, no fear, no hesitation. Slowly, she nodded. Aldrich exhaled shakily, relief flooding him. He leaned in, touching his forehead to hers. "Weary build," he whispered.
Together.
As dawn rose over Silver's hard forest, illuminating the stone arch, Saren held her twins close and felt something she hadn't felt since the very beginning. Hope. The kind that didn't break. The kind that grew stronger. The kind worth fighting for. And as Aldrich lifted her gently into his arms, carrying her and their newborns home, the wind whispered through the trees, carrying a new prophecy, not of destruction, but of a future rewritten by love, courage, and the two tiny heirs who had changed everything. If you reached the end of the story, I want to know, would you watch this as a full movie or series? Which scene hit you the hardest? And do you want a part 2 following Lyra and Rowan as teenagers? Drop your answers in the comments and tell me where in the world you're watching from.